Hello, we're back. We were having a really good, I don't know, we've been in it for like almost 2 hours now, but we've been having a really good conversation about kind of everything. But one main one was traditional midwifery versus maybe what some would call, which we don't love, right? But midwives, where they're very medicalized and it's very polarized, but not necessarily. Like, it's not necessary to be polarized on this. And we want to get into the nuance of what is traditional midwifery? How can that look? How does it currently look in different scenarios? And maybe what traditional midwifery means to us.
Mhm.
So here we are with Sarita and Rowan, and Rowan's going to start us off.
Yeah, hey there. Well, this has been fresh for me because I was just interviewed the last couple of days on Bliss Young's um, podcast called At Her Feet. And this is a question she asked is what does traditional midwifery mean to you? And, how does it differ? And, it gets us all thinking, like when we really hear, I think of I'm not talking about the original midwives from 100 years ago that aren't alive today or haven't been living in this type of uh capitalistic and different type of society, but the renaissance of midwifery
Mhm.
that happened in the 70s when like Sarita came around and all these folks came around. Well, what were the textbooks that were there? It was Williams obstetrics, right? It was Oxford and Foote. We didn't have books written by midwives. We had books written by people who had attended births that had written books, and that just happened to be them. And then I start thinking about, well, how resourced is this community? Like, what resources are at hand? Because traditionally, that's what we did, right? Like, if we talk about tradition, you use the resources that are at hand. What is affordable, what is accessible, and what works.
Mhm.
And that might be cayenne and that might be Pitocin. And both of those things can both be traditional and they can both be utilized in a home birth practice. I think, like, because Wapi always says she who heals is correct. Love your tool, use your tool, bless your tool, create relationship with your tool is how I usually say that, right? Like create a relationship with it. So I think it's cultural, it's resources, it's so many things. And yeah, I'm gonna stop and hear Sarita. I see you nodding, and I know you have so much good.
Oh, that's well, I was agreeing with you for one thing. What it made me remember that one of the things I used to do at a program that I taught was I would ask the participants to do a compare and contrast. And at first I would call it, between like an obstetrician and a midwife, and that was too adversarial. So then I changed it to between the medical model of care and the midwifery model of care. And that even still was a bit adversarial. So I ultimately talked about the physiologic model of care and the management model of care. And really, what were the differences in terms of who has the power in the room, who the priorities are, all of those kinds of things. And it was a really interesting exercise to help us all get real clear about the fact that it wasn't about the credentials and it wasn't about what we called ourselves. It was about the model of care that we practiced, and in particular, the philosophy behind it. So, like you said, Rowan, it could be that the traditional midwife might use cayenne or Pitocin, but they're going to use it from the same model of care. So it wasn't about the tool, it was about the philosophy behind which you use the tool, like who has the decision making power, right? Like those kinds of things. If you're using herbs to induce labor, that's not necessarily a physiologic model of care. That's a management model of care, even though you're using herbs, not Pitocin, to do it, right?
Right.
So just being really clear at all points about that model of care made it easier for me to balance my own bipolar experience. And like I always say that with jest because genetically there's, lots of bipolar in my family. And having been an illegal midwife and a licensed physician, is fairly bipolar. And what I could say was that moving from illegal midwifery into osteopathic training wasn't didn't wasn't a reversal. It wasn't a change. It was an expansion. So that's
Mhm.
what helped. And I learned from old traditional docs, right? Who learned how to practice before all the machines that go beep came along. So I could call them traditional practitioners, even though because of their philosophy, even though they were licensed physicians in a modern world working in a hospital. Right?
Yep, I
Yeah.
love that. One of the things I remember saying um, yesterday in this interview was I have witnessed doctors practice the midwifery model of care, and I have witnessed midwives that had no credentials behind their name practice the obstetrical model of care. Like
Exactly.
it's it really that philosophical thing really does come in, and always comes down to relationship. And Alicia, you were talking before when we were having our 2-hour pre-chat about all the things, um, about how you have been traveling and working, and you've been locked in with this one midwife that it has just sunk up so much that the clients even thought that y'all had been working together forever. And you were talking about how she does that so brilliantly, how she weaves in the tools that she has and has a relationship with into her community practice, which is very traditional.
Yeah, yeah, she is very traditional and maybe even would call herself that. I don't know. She's a funny one. She's not one for titles. She's not one for boxes. And she'll
Mhm.
tell you that too. Um, but she's very pro family,
Right.
very pro education. And in their prenatal time, they do lots and lots of education, and she's very upfront and forward with, this is who I am. This is what you're getting. And if you don't want this, I've got some names for you of women and midwives who will serve you very well that will do that. And unapologetic would be another good word for her. And I mean this with all the compliments. They are compliments, I promise. But she she has many tools and she's familiar with her tools and she doesn't use them out of shame or guilt or doesn't end up with shame or guilt after using them. She'll use them because she knows, well, this is a good time for this tool. It's not an all the
Mhm.
time tool.
Mhm.
And if we had all the time tools, if we had births that were standard and happened all the time the way they do, then we wouldn't do half the stuff or know half the stuff we do know and do. So she has, it's been really beautiful to watch her put into practice or to watch her practice of um, being so intentional and being so connected with what she has and so purposeful with them, where there's a time and a place to know someone's pulse in labor. There's a
Right.
time and a place to have a baseline. Because if you're going to do a pulse later on after you see a problem, know the baseline, right?
Right.
That number doesn't mean squat for anybody if you don't know the baseline. And
Mhm.
so she has encouraged me to reevaluate um my relationship with tools, specific tools, with all tools, with using tools in general. I have my own mentorship that I run. And one of my mentees and I had a conversation yesterday about tools of, well, I started on this direction where I was taught we don't touch, we don't talk, we don't do anything. I'm just a beautiful wallflower, is what I would have said. And, but now, as she's hearing stories and getting more involved in the world of, I don't even want to call it educated birth, but birth that's not just we trust birth. We trust it'll all work out and the spirits have it all. Coming out of a world of that, but to where tools and hands and relationship are all necessary and all weave together. And so she's navigating, do I want to carry that? How could I implement that? And even a new thing for me is not necessarily asking, and I want your thoughts on this too, but not asking, do you want to take your blood pressure? Hey, I'm seeing XYZ. Do you want me to take your blood pressure? For certain relationships, that's okay, right? That's good and that's what they want. But in others, depending on why they're wanting your companionship, it's, hey, I'm seeing XYZ. Are you okay if I take your blood pressure to look into it more? It's that really subtle shift, but you're
Mhm.
still allowing them the decision. You've still given education prior to, right? That wasn't the whole conversation. But we can be a little more firm, right? And firm isn't bad. Yeah?
Right. Right.
I think also to shift that slightly further to
Yeah.
even say, I'd like to know your blood pressure because
Ah,
Right.
yes.
Exactly. This
because
is why the information will be helpful.
Yeah.
this is right. And because I feel like we have, hopefully, if given the chance,
Right.
because sometimes people just land in our lap at 39 weeks and we don't have time. But in a perfect world, we've created a relationship prenatally with this client. And so, what is happening in even late pregnancy? It doesn't always have to be at the birth or postpartum. If we see something that isn't normal for this person, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like we've set up this relationship prenatally that there's an implied consent. There is
Right.
an implied consent. I'm not
Right.
going to ask you, and I've heard this happen, and this is why I'm saying this. Can I breathe for your baby? Honey, if your baby needs to be breathed for, I'm breathing for your baby. I'm not going to
Right.
ask.
It's why
Right.
I'm there. It's why
Right.
I'm there.
But
There's a
then you've got this super hot, like, implied consent. How dare you?
and
That
don't
is
come into contract with me.
Right. That's relationship.
That
right.
It's a
is
relationship. We used to talk a lot, my team at the birth center, especially, we were just real honest with people that they might think we're not doing anything, right?
mhm,
That we were actually doing a lot, even though we might be standing out in the hallway or whatever.
Hmm.
But that if something arose that required attention, it was the understanding between us and the families that were hiring us to be there, that action was what we would be doing, and that we would be telling them what we were doing
Yeah.
and talking to them through it, not saying, can I breathe for your baby, is it okay, but saying your baby needs this. And and ahead of time we would have already known that we weren't going to wait around, because the baby would prefer we not wait, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. To quote Karen Strange, it wants to breathe. Why not help it? Right.
Yeah.
It's
you're
that's
never
why
going to
we're
cause
there.
harm by breathing for a baby.
Hmm.
Right. That's why we're there. Right.
Right.
For me, blood pressure wasn't something I had to ask permission for very often, because again, that was set up relationship prenatally. It was something that,
Hmm.
we had touched them plenty. We took their blood pressure. They took their own blood pressure, especially during COVID. Blood pressure was no big deal, right? The things that really took more conversation as much as anything were any kind of cervical exams. And
Hmm.
oftentimes it was me trying to talk them out of it, right?
Right.
Because I didn't really think it was going to be helpful or that they needed it. Or it was coming to a situation where I was asking permission to gather this piece of information to give to them to
Right.
add to their decision making capability, right? So I think when we talk about it being traditional and we're talking about all these implied consent kind of things, the philosophy, the perspective behind it is still that the power is in the right place, right?
Right.
The power still belongs to the family, no matter what tool I used, no matter what information gathering technique we agreed needed to be
Hmm.
used. The power of what we were going to do with that information ultimately belonged to the family, either in that moment or because they had already given me permission in an emergency to do whatever needed to be done. And then we'd catch up later. And we would talk about that too. If we're moving so fast, we're not talking to you, we'll catch up
Right.
as soon as we can.
Right.
Promise.
So I want to add two things.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, while there's been this prenatal relationship built where we all know what's happening, we know what's going to go down,
Mm-hmm.
but then sometimes there's a doula added into the mix. or there's an
Mhm.
auntie added into the mix, or somebody who wasn't there for those conversations, that can look really terrible. Like,
Yeah.
you just gave her pit and you didn't even ask, right?
Right.
Or, oh, she's doing heart tones more than I think she wanted, right? It's a whole story. It's this whole team. So if you want to keep down confusion, if you want to keep everything clear and everyone in this good spirits, meet with them prenatally. I always
Right.
meet with the whole team prenatally.
Right.
That's
It
so
was a
necessary.
requirement. It was a
Yeah.
requirement in
Yeah.
our practice that everyone who's going to be present at the birth
Mhm.
at the 36-week meeting, you get to see all of our tools at that meeting because we're carrying them into your house for your birth.
Yeah.
And you get to ask us all the questions you want to ask. And we share who we are, and we shared a meal usually at that prenatal because it might be
Mhm.
the only time I'm meeting auntie. It might be, the only time I'm meeting grandma. So we're gonna dive in to all the
Mhm.
what ifs. And this is when would also have the conversation traditionally um of the hard stuff. This is
Mhm.
talked about again, not that we hadn't already touched on them, but we're at 36 weeks now. If there's an emergency, who's picking up your toddler? Who's taking the dog? Who am I calling for your spiritual advisory if that is something that you desire? Who, like, where's all your paperwork? And we would put those emergency numbers and all the things in a spot that we all knew where it was.
Yeah.
Mhm.
On
On
top
the
of
fridge.
the fridge. Yep, it was usually around then or on the fridge, on top of or stuck to.
Mhm.
So um that was when we got to do that too, which allowed those people who hadn't been at all those prenatals
Mhm.
to really hear, okay, like maybe these people have their stuff together, and also to ask those questions like, wow, why do we talk about these things around birth?
Right. Right. Because if not, those additional people who have that fear, that need to protect the client from the midwife,
Yeah.
right? Because that's the doula's role, right? To protect the client from the practitioner. And we used to tell people, if you think you need protection from us, maybe you need a different midwife,
Mm.
right? Like you don't really need, like we have this relationship. So what I would say is that having somebody in the room, like the auntie or the doula who's not part of that, now what you've done is you've created that dysfunctional team that can screw up normal because they
Right.
are the team. And it's not a good team anymore at that point.
Mhm.
So I think that, and we'll talk again, we'll do another podcast about teamwork and building teams. But I think that's also where this comes in, that anybody that's at the birth is on the team,
Yeah.
and they have to understand that and they need to be a good team member for the benefit of the person that they're there to support. It's
And
about that person.
one of the things that we would always say too at that 36-week meeting is there may come a time when the primary midwife will ask you all to leave.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
We need to do it immediately if we ask.
Hmm. Yeah, we've done that, definitely.
Because we've already had a conversation with our clients that if certain things are going to happen, we need to clear the room.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
we're doing that on their behest. So
Mhm.
um, there is that. And when we think about the traditional midwife, as we started this conversation with, we didn't have to have these conversations as much because she was well known in the community.
Right,
Was everybody's midwife. She came to everybody's broken
right,
bone. She came when anybody was sick, and
Mm.
she was from womb to tomb, right? She sat with you when you died.
right,
And so she was already trusted, right? She
right,
was already known as that wise woman.
right. And
Hmm.
I think also birth wasn't seen, and I'll use this term, like these days it's become a spectator sport,
Hmm.
right? Like we watch the videos, we watch, it's a spectator sport. And in the past, in history, birth was a private event that belonged to the family. And
Mm.
if community members were involved, it's because they were the neighbor ladies who knew a thing or two, who had their own babies. They were the neighbor ladies who weren't afraid, who weren't there to protect the woman from the practitioner. They were there to support and be part of making the soup, right?
Yes.
And not there in some savior capacity.
Yeah, these are the women who were taking care of your older children and making sure
Right,
they were
right,
fed and
right,
making sure your fridge was well stocked and
right. And they moved in with you. My aunt, who is deceased, she was the last of the 13 children. And before she died, she was telling me stories about, she remembers when her mom would give birth. And this would have been, yeah, 30s, something like that, 40s even. And because, she had 13, that's a lot of years. And her sister, Lucy, who was the midwife, would come over and move in.
Mhm.
And all the children the younger children that, needed to be taken care of would be sent over to Aunt Clara's house and stay there until, Aunt Lucy was ready for them to come back after the baby was born and everything was taken care of. And then she stayed for a couple weeks and took care of the family.
Wow.
Right. That was the important role of the midwife. It wasn't making sure you were healthy prenatally, although they would have known that because they were in the community doing things with you and would have addressed those kinds of things. And it
Mm.
wasn't about necessarily being at the birth all the time. It
Right.
was about taking care of stuff, taking care of everything else so that the woman could give birth and be supported and be fed. And I always use the story of my grandmother because she had 13 kids, one every 2 years, just like clockwork. I often wonder if she ever had a period, but because she started at 16 and stopped at 42, right? Like that's a lot of being pregnant. And she lived in, a good healthy life till she was like almost 90 years old. So the reason she was able to be healthy and all of those babies lived to adulthood, they all survived. She had no complications that I know of. And it's because she had good postpartum support.
That's right.
Right.
That's what made the difference, right? Traditionally, that's what traditional midwives understood, that taking care of the women postpartum was how you kept them healthy for
Yeah.
future pregnancies and for old
Mhm.
age.
Yeah. And
Right.
that's where, so that is where I love that our Vedic tradition has come in a little bit, in the last
Yeah.
couple of
Hmm.
decades. With that, the mom's feet doesn't touch the floor for 40 days
Hmm. Right.
and she's being nourished. I love how
Mhm.
you put it, Sarita, one of your clients who has become one of all of our friends, um, who shared her story from the moth stage, talks
Hmm.
about how flabbergasted she was as a busy woman when you told her how long she was staying in bed.
She has this line in her moth story. It's hilarious where, I said something about, yeah, so if you can stay in bed or, off your feet for 40 days. And she just kind of goes, this woman who seemed so sensible up until that point. I was like, yeah, exactly. It's
Right. But
hilarious.
but then after she stayed in bed for that 40 days, it was just to stay next to the bed, right? Like there were steps to her
Right.
jumping back into life. And I love that in the end, she comes back and goes, not only did she do it, but she knew that she needed it and she just got to be here in this bubble with this baby.
Mhm.
Right.
And,
Right.
because she was having her first baby in her 40s, right? So,
Right.
um, to be able to not only, of course, she was flabbergasted, and nobody said you were that sensible, but we're all a little crazy. However, she trusted you enough because of
Right.
the relationship you had to know that
Hmm.
you had her well-being at heart, and
Right.
this is part of that education and that relationship building and trust, which is that is really what gets down to
Right.
traditional midwifery.
Right.
It's not about what's
Continuity.
in your tool bag. It's not about this. It is your relationship in your community, how you communicate with them, and as Sarita said, what's the philosophy behind it?
Right. At one point in my family practice, this is one of my favorite families. I was taking care of 5 generations of the same family, and I
Oh,
had attended the births of 2 of those generations. And so when you do that, that's when you really begin to understand human behavior, human patterns,
Mm.
genetics, right? And it gets easier with each generation because you're like, oh yeah, I know. Like the woman that, the one of the generations that I attended, then I attended her daughter. Like it was echoes that I could hear echoes in the daughter of the mother from those years before. And that's tradition, that's community, right? That's not profession,
Right.
that's service. So midwifery wasn't a profession, it was a vocation, it was a social service. You were the social worker, you were the sanitary worker, you were the health worker. It wasn't just you went to births and you touched bellies,
Yeah.
you know. So
And
that's traditional midwifery.
touch on that a moment, because another piece of the conversation I had yesterday with Bliss on her podcast um, was that vocation piece, and that
Mhm.
that um, that this is a ministry, really. It
Right.
is this thing that, our sacred service to our communities. Yet we live in this capitalistic society now. Like we are, like it or not, living in capitalistic USA. And
Mhm.
because there has been this undertone of, well, traditional midwives don't charge.
Right. Right.
Mm.
Exactly. They're
And
not
so
trained.
I had a while back when struggling with this, because I had people tell me that, and we've heard some of the older
Mhm.
midwives that came around in the 60s and 70s saying you can't charge for this. This is
Mhm.
your calling. And so I got to put, well, don't they pay pastors? Oh,
Yeah.
they do.
Exactly.
They do actually, because pastor got to eat. And
Right.
so I started looking up what it meant to have a vocation versus a career. And what
Mhm.
it really came down to is you can turn your vocation into a career, but you can't
Right.
choose it. But you can't choose a vocation, it chooses you.
Right. Right.
The difference.
Right.
So yes, of course, traditional midwives deserve and should be well compensated, whether
Mhm.
that be a barter that they really love and need, something that, is beneficial to them. Because I'm
Right.
like, I'm all for bartering if it's something I need and would spend money on anyway. You're going to fix my car? Great.
Yeah.
You're going
Right.
to clean my gutters and trim that tree? Fantastic. You know, I've
Right.
had some great barters um, that I've loved, but not, I'm not gonna trade for things that I don't necessarily need or would spend money
Right.
on,
Right.
because,
Exactly.
it has
No
to be
horses.
sacred reciprocity in that it's a win-win.
Right.
No
Right.
horses, no, Serena.
No horses. No horses. And traditionally, that wouldn't have been an issue because the midwife was well respected and a necessary part of the community. So, like, not that they were not burned at the stake or anything, but they were thought of and
Mm.
honored with food or whatever, especially in indigenous communities, because the midwife was an essential member of the community, you
Right.
know?
And it wasn't just while she was serving you. Like if you
Right.
were the
All the
fisherman,
time.
you put fish on her stoop every week for your entire life.
Right.
You fixed her roof when it was leaking her entire life.
Right.
She
That's
was serving
community.
you from womb to tomb,
Hmm.
as well as
I
everyone.
mean, don't get us wrong, we love to be fed after births.
Oh
Oh,
yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
I got made this like it took up the whole dinner plate. It was this ribeye that the dad made. It
oh,
was
Hmm.
so good. It was like noon, and he says, "Hey, you want some vodka?" I'm like, "Can you put some orange juice in it at least?" It was so good. We're just all sitting there chomping down on this hunk of steak, and
Hmm.
it was so loving, so sweet.
Hmm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Food
Some
is love.
of my favorite gifts I've gotten that I still use were given to me by clients,
Yeah.
some hand knitted hats I still wear in the winter, and hand knitted scarves. And
Mhm.
if you know me, I have a little bit of a problem with African baskets. I got one of those from one of my clients
Oh,
one
sweet.
She was like, I noticed you like these, and here is one that I made. Like she went to a
Aw,
basket weaving class and she made it.
that's
Hmm.
precious.
So
Right.
I love and cherish all of those things. And yes, the food.
Mhm,
Mhm.
right, right.
Like,
So that would have been traditionally the community's response and responsibility, just
Mhm.
like paying the minister and feeding them Sunday dinner, like there
Mhm.
were there were rituals and traditions built into it that supported these essential members of the community.
Right.
Yeah.
something else I want to bring back that Claudia did. I mean, I won't be bringing it back because I'm not in practice anymore, but I thought this was a lovely thing, and that I'm pretty sure she learned it. She did it from, you know, uh, borrowing it from her preceptor way back in the 70s. But every year on Claudia's birthday, we had family day, and we would
Mhm.
rent out the local
Fun.
park. She was born in
Hmm.
this, she had a summer birthday, so like it was nice to be outside. We would rent out the summer park, and all the families she had ever served were invited. And we would do this big potluck, and all the kids would be running around, and everybody got to say hey, and they were friends, and like it was just
Hmm.
like this big community thing. And she got to see all her her families and see where people were in their growth, and it was just lovely. I loved that day every year.
Right. It's like watching the back to school pictures on Facebook.
Yeah.
The modern gathering is Facebook picture.
Right.
Would
Christmas,
she tell
Christmas
them?
and back to school.
Would she tell them it was her birthday?
I mean, they knew.
Yeah, okay. But it wasn't
It
like, come
wasn't a
celebrate my birthday with me and let's all have
No,
a family day.
you would just say, it's my birthday and this is what I want.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
nice,
This is my
nice,
birthday, and my greatest gift would be able to spend time with all of you.
Yeah, that's loving.
nice, nice.
Can we talk about move into how sometimes it's viewed or poised in a way of, oh, you're doing that out of fear. Oh, you're
Mm,
listening to heart tones because either maybe you are, maybe you're doing it because you have some trauma, you have some history, or maybe it's, well, it's fear-based to listen to heart tones. It's fear-based to do XYZ. I don't think that's true. Not all the time.
Mhm.
It's not fear to observe something. That's fact.
Right. So
right.
can I use a garden story here?
I'd love it.
So you've heard me talk before about tomatoes and hornworms, all right? So hornworms are the caterpillars that turn into these beautiful sphinx or hawk moths or hummingbird moths. And they're quite lovely, but they'll also eat all of your tomato plants and you won't get any fruit, right?
Mhm.
So I grow garden to be able to feed my family. And so it's important to me that we get the harvest, right? And I know that at certain times of the year, those pretty little moths are going to start laying eggs. And even though there's lots of acreage here, they're going to choose my tomato patch to lay their pretty little eggs. And so I go out, or I did there during a period of time. I went out every day, at least twice a day, to watch for these pretty little, because they're hard to see for one thing, these little hornworm caterpillars. Because I knew if I could find them and remove them from my tomato patch before they did damage to the plant, that I would reach my goal of a healthy harvest. Does that make sense?
Mm.
And if I
Mhm.
just wanted to let nature take its course, then I was going to get lots of hornworms and they were going to eat all of my tomato plants and I wasn't going to get any harvest.
Natural consequences. And
Natural
Right.
not
consequences.
consequences in a bad way, but that's
No,
just the
no.
process.
Am I afraid of hornworms? No, but I
I
do love
am.
feeding them to my chickens.
I am.
They
They're nasty
love them.
looking.
Oh, they love them.
I
Oh,
was,
they're pretty little things. But I do this because I am aware that hornworms can eat my entire tomato patch overnight. It is amazing. They are hungry, hungry caterpillars. It is
Wow.
amazing, right? And so I know that. Am I afraid they might destroy my tomato patch? Yeah, but it's not fear. It's awareness that this is
Mm.
happening and it's a natural consequence. And so I can relate that to listening to heart tones, right? Like sometimes I did plenty of births where we didn't listen, and we did births where we listened on some regular basis because we knew to be aware, and
Mhm.
we that information for those situations also was information given to the clients, to the family. Like we weren't doing it to make ourselves feel better. We were doing it to know, to create the picture of what was happening of reassurance for the family or whoever needed that. Does that make sense? So I think fear is a loaded word to use here. And I think awareness is really what we're looking for. That's my opinion.
First off, that is one of my favorite stories that has come of this particular growing season from Sarita. And
I felt so many this year.
and I also love the fact that you weren't just removing the hormones, you were harvesting them to feed your chickens, which
All
feeds
right.
eggs.
Circle of life.
Still the circle of life, right? Your chickens give you eggs, you give
Right.
your chickens these hornworms.
And I love them.
I'm sure they do. Bugs are the best.
Well, those in particular, as soon as I head for the garden now, they all come running and they circle
I
outside.
know.
They're like, I swear they're like going, are there any hornworms today? You're like, you can see them almost salivating, waiting for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that. So traditionally, the way that we learn also is through storytelling. So that is true traditional midwifery right there, what we just experienced through the story of Sarita's garden. And for me, I just don't think taking heart tones are fear-based. I mean, maybe when you're in the hospital and they just have to fill a box every 15 minutes, you can call it all sorts of things, right? You're reaching this protocol or you're doing whatever.
Right.
For me, on the wise woman wheel, right, that Susan Weed has, it's the gathering information. We're gathering information.
Right. Right.
Doesn't mean we're going to do anything with it yet.
Right. Just
And
tracking a pattern.
right. And so I have certainly, the very first client I ever had as my primary, we never, ever once listened in her labor because that was a request that she had. She knew that it was disruptive to her and she didn't want it. And I never had, because this is also something I hope we're not losing in our evolution. I never had an intuition that I needed to listen.
And prenatally, when she told you that she didn't want heart tones done, was that a long education topic of, well, here's what it can tell us and here's
No,
what it won't tell us?
no.
No.
You just
She knew
noticed.
what she wanted. She was educated. She had had her son 2 years before. She knew what disrupted her labor.
Yeah.
And she was in tune. And we listened prenatally. We listened a lot, very frequently at the end of her pregnancy because she went 44.5 weeks. And we never once used a Doppler because that was also one of her rules.
Yeah.
One of her requests like that. And she didn't say, you can never use a Doppler on me, which is also a big red whatever. She said, I would prefer we not have to use a Doppler if we can use the fetoscope and get all the information we need.
Totally.
Which is a whole different way of putting that, right? Because then she's telling me, I trust you to tell me if you're not getting enough information with that fetoscope. And you feel like you need that Doppler, which I never did because her baby.
Right. There's this trait of trust. She knew you had no underlying ulterior motives. No, I've got this box to check. Well, if I don't do this and I get audited, they're going to come after me. Or, well, now you're on a timeline due to my regulations of who I've put myself under. There was nothing like that.
No, because I
This
didn't
was
for anyone but her.
right. You only were working for her and her family. And so it's this, she could trust your motives. You're down the list. You're not on the top of the list of wanting them both to be safe and healthy and alive. You're obviously on the list. You're not the top of the list, but it's like she knows you're invested in this. She knows to trust you, and you know to trust her words and her intuition and what she's giving you.
Right. I was sitting at her kitchen table so I could hear her progress.
Yeah.
I could feel it deepening in her voice. I wasn't in the room because that was another one of her requests. Nobody was allowed to be in the room, not even her husband. He was out pressure washing the house because that was his task during her labor until he was called in. And I loved her for every bit of this. Like she had it down. This woman called me at 6 in the morning and was like, I'd like you to be here at 9. Like I had time to shower and pack up extra clothes and have breakfast and coffee. And like she knew what she wanted. And she never wavered because she was like, I made poor choices in my first one, and I invited everybody and their brother to be in my birth room. And
Mhm.
it took forever.
I've
So,
heard that a lot.
but I could use all my other senses, and my spidey senses never perked up.
And had they, then you would have.
Yeah,
Right.
I would have been like, hey,
You made me think too of a story. We attended a newly graduated obstetrician
whew,
many years ago.
okay.
And she wanted to have a home birth. She was very intuitive and she wanted to have a home birth before going into practice with the local obstetricians. Timed it all out and it was a beautiful birth. But and you've heard me probably tell some other stories about it, but she of course wanted, because she was trained and she wanted to use us to use the Doppler and listen to heart tones. Like, okay, we do that. But the first time we noticed that whenever we would put the transducer on the thing, that it would pop her out of her mama brain into her practitioner brain, right? Like
Totally.
you could see it happen. And so the decision was made and related to her that we were going to use headphones. And that was the first time I really saw the use of headphones. And from there on out, we still listened according to the way she wanted it to be listened to, but she couldn't hear it. And we
Hmm.
did that with that same kind of trust of, if you need to know that something's not okay, we are going to tell you immediately.
Totally.
And so it really was. And so this is where I'll relate it back to what we were talking about, models of care. She had been trained in a model of care to expect to watch for bad things, which
Right.
is more of that fear-based reality that you're talking about. That it is a fear-based reality because it's a liability avoidance and all the things that go with that corporate business model. But us listening to it, as long as she didn't pop into that fear-based model that she was trained in, then we could keep her in her mama brain and
Hmm.
continue on with a traditional use by not having it interfere with her. So
So
yeah,
you
it's this
were
relationship.
her needs of having the heart tones taken so often
Right.
without interrupting her flow.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it doesn't, you can do it.
That is traditional midwifery. And there were other times I had a mom who came to me. I didn't have a lot of time to build relationship with her family, and they were not home birthers. They had walked out of a hospital in the middle of an induction,
Mhm.
hours into Pitocin. They walked out, and they knew they couldn't go back there.
Right.
They knew they would not be treated well if they
Right.
if they went back there. So they, got on the mama blogs and was like, who the heck is gonna even think about coming? And like 17 people were like, oh, you should just call Rowan. She'll come hang out.
She'll do it.
And she's just so happened to live like 3 blocks from me. So I was like, we're speed dating, right? We're going to speed date. We're going to get to know each other. Found out that they actually changed her date from her knowing her conception two
Mm.
Oh.
weeks up. So she wasn't even 40 weeks yet. So I'm like, so I changed the date. And she was like, you can just do that. And I'm like, well, they did.
Right.
I'm just listening to you. You're
Right.
telling me this is when you conceived. That would make you this. That's why your baby did not react to the Pitocin except for to back up.
Mm.
Right.
And you had no
Wasn't
cervical,
time.
no
Wasn't.
cervical changes, hours of pit. And so I listened to these were not philosophically my people. They had planned their hospital birth. They had had a hospital
Mhm.
birth with their first one. They weren't deeply enmeshed in the home birth community.
Culture. Yeah.
Yeah, the culture. So I didn't try to change them. I didn't try to
Mm.
like shift that in any way and make
Right.
them. I met them where they were. And of course, we used the Doppler.
Right.
She didn't remember me using the Doppler during her labor because
Right.
you do it in a very stealth
That's
way.
like ninja.
I think when it's fear-based, it's this production. Okay, I need you to lie down. You have to do
Mhm.
the thing. And now I got to listen and everybody be still and be quiet. And I would just slip in and put the little wand on her and get a little thing and then just come back out. And it was more
Right.
for the dad.
Mhm.
He saw me do it. He knew I was doing it.
Right.
Because these were not home birthers. He was like, who's going to get, well, how are we going to do this? And what about this? You know?
Right. You can do it without it being a production.
It's in a production. She didn't even notice it. She was in her zone. And,
Hmm.
but it was reassuring to him. Sometimes we're listening to heart tones, not for the mom or for us.
Right.
I was one time at a birth where this was baby 4 or 5 kind of a thing. And all of her past babies had been hospital births. She had epidurals. She had the things.
Mhm,
And all of them had to have some kind of an instrument, vacuum forceps of the sort, but they were all vaginal births.
mhm,
And so she was doing a home birth. I think it was her sister-in-law or someone had had a home birth, and they're like, "Oh, you have to do this. Hire my midwife." And they had a good relationship, good prenatal time. And then her birth came, and she was having a hard time fully engaging in the push. And like this was her first time truly feeling these sensations and having the opportunity to let her body just do what it's going to do, right? She'd always been coached. She had never felt it because of the epidurals.
mhm,
And so she stayed at that stage where, like, right on the cusp of having really good, we're having a baby pushes, and then just letting the air out and letting them peter out and not really going anywhere. And so the midwife I was assisting, she was there. She was watching this whole picture, knowing her past, and knowing she might mentally, subconsciously be waiting for coaching. She
Hmm.
might mentally, subconsciously need to be on her back.
mhm.
So
Hmm.
she got her on her back. She gave
Yeah.
her the coaching. And what do you know? She had a
Had a
baby.
baby.
Hmm.
That was what she needed. And it was this meeting in the middle of, oh, well, now you're home birth and you have to do it this way. But that's not
Hmm.
what she needed. She needed this, but in this location.
Right.
And it was so beautiful to watch that meet in the middle. It was
Yeah.
Hmm.
wonderful.
Hmm. That's traditional midwifery, meeting them
Yeah.
where they are.
Yeah.
Right.
I've coached, I have done it.
Hmm.
I have done coached, targeted, even pressure pushing.
Oh, yes.
Right. Me
That
too.
had to be done.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Right.
She looked at me and said, I need you to just do it. And it was kind
Hmm.
of one of the same situations. We
Hmm.
Hmm.
got
Right.
to her house and she wanted to be checked. She was 4 centimeters. She was like, time for my epidural. I was like, I'll fill the pool. You know, I was the assistant at this birth. I was still in my apprenticeship. I got in so much trouble because we know salt during labor, sugar after. We know this. It's all embedded in us. But this beautiful mama, she was having, she was just getting her brain around it, right? And she had invited too many church members to her
Mm.
birth, but she figured out well into it. But she was really good at telling them to shut up. Um, but she just looked at me with these big doe eyes and said, all I want is some Mountain Dew. You
I
know,
can get that for you.
and I did. I did. I poured her a few ounces of Mountain Dew. I did so good. I haven't had any my whole pregnancy. And I just watched my husband have it. She was so tired. I was like, honey, I got you. And so I went and I poured her some Mountain Dew. And of course, here comes Claudia walking in the room going, what are you doing? I'm doing what she asked.
Yeah.
Mhm. Right.
If she
Exactly.
pukes, she can puke on me.
Right.
It's fine.
Right. Exactly.
It's a little bit. It's not a 2 liter. You know?
There's this idea that if you're a traditional midwife, there are certain tools that you're not allowed to think about. You're not allowed to touch, you're not allowed to have. And those can vary, right? And not only tools, but also skills. Oh, you're not allowed to do vaginal exams. Oh, you're not allowed to carry medication. Well, some would say you're not literally not allowed to. Okay. All
Well,
right.
there
The
are
state
laws.
might say that.
Yeah.
The state could say that.
But there are other things where it's like, oh, you're a traditional midwife. You can't have a Doppler. You can't, all these things, X, Y, Z.
Hmm.
And there are different flavors,
Mhm.
but you have to come to that on your own. You have
Right.
to know, where are my boundaries? What am I comfortable with? What am I familiar with? What do I want to supply my families with? And in turn, that will dictate what your families are asking for, more or less.
Mhm.
And so I know there was times where you and I, the three of us, we were in a mentor session, and I was coming to you with these questions like, well, I thought in my mind I had this image of this is who I am. I can't do that. I can't have that. And honestly, I was imagining a sister of mine thinking, she's like the epitome of it. She would never do that. But then I had to realize, but I'm not her. There's many things in our lives that we don't do similarly. And this doesn't have to be the same thing. We are very two totally different flavors. While we still love and respect each other highly, two totally different flavors. And that's okay. And that's perfect because we are the right supporter for our families.
Right.
So it's just a fascinating road trip to go on with yourself when you allow yourself to question, when you allow yourself, because sometimes it is a culture and sometimes it's almost like a cult mindset of there's
Yes.
no way. I can't do
Right.
that.
An ideology. Hmm.
Yes. So allow yourself to question and come out of the box.
And
And
allow yourself to change.
yeah,
Hmm.
you can change.
Please.
For
Like
right now, maybe.
evolved so many times, even in
Mhm.
my short practice.
Right.
Maybe I just went through a birth story that makes me want to be a little more aware of something. That's okay. Acknowledge that and
Hmm.
do the work around that. Don't adopt that just because of fear, right? You can
Right.
adopt that because you're now knowing more things or you're deeper in education or whatever it is. So there are things I've adopted even from serving up here with these midwives that's like, oh, I should have had more education about that. I can adopt that. That's not a bad thing to have on
Hmm.
my toolkit, on my tool belt.
Right. Right. Or to at
Hmm.
least know what it is. And somebody who does have that tool, if you don't have that tool and you
Yes.
know that it's the appropriate tool for this
Hmm.
situation, and
Hmm.
knowing who does have that tool and is good at it, like that is also a, an art form,
Right.
right?
It's also part of serving the whole community, right?
Right.
I did not suture. I make no bones about that.
Mhm.
I don't want anyone's down theirs being the first one I sew. I can't sew a button on. Nobody wants me to do that.
Hmm.
So I got real good at supporting not tearing. I also got really good at seaweed and alternatives. I also always had an envelope with suturing fee
Mhm.
and somebody I could call to suture.
Yeah, I've done it for people.
Always. For years, we all used the same suturer because she had worked in a very busy birth center on the
Mm.
in Texas, and a lot of people had to be repaired. She got really good at it.
Yeah.
Mhm. That
So,
is how you get good at it.
right, she
Repetition. Hmm.
did it so frequently when she was working in that center that she offered that to us. She was like, "Hey, I can do that for all of you, so y'all
Cool.
don't have to worry about it."
Hmm.
And then when she retired, suddenly we had an obstetrician working in home birth in our community, and we all used him for that. I'm like, who doesn't want a surgeon to sew you up?
Yeah,
Right.
right.
He's real
Right.
good at it. I watched him do some magic. So that it's I think that is truly traditional is understanding our limitations,
Hmm.
Mhm.
knowing where our skill isn't,
Hmm.
and meeting that need from outside sources.
Right.
We don't have to do it all ourselves.
No.
Right.
I don't have to be good at suturing. I don't have to be good at suturing to be a good midwife, but I got to know somebody who does.
Right. If it needs done, it needs
It
done.
needs done. And that's just how it is. When I was in my apprenticeship, Claudia didn't own a fetoscope. So I asked her permission first, of course, they are her clients. After you are done listening with your Doppler, is it okay if I ask them if I can listen with my fetoscope? Because I wanted to keep that skill sharp, right?
Right.
And they loved it. They would be like, sure, listen away.
What a funny turn. What midwife doesn't like, who would consider themselves a traditional midwife? I'm sure she did. What
It was,
traditional midwife didn't have a fetoscope? That's such a funny flip.
It's a tool.
she didn't have good hearing.
Ah.
This was
Hmm.
before the core, right? Like where you could amplify. She couldn't hear with a fetoscope.
So then why have one? Right.
She was spent half her life on tractors
Mm,
with no ear protection. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
She was a farmer.
hmm
So she would just say that. She was like, I can't hear good enough. Like my hearing is not top notch. So the Doppler was her saving grace with that.
She knew her tool.
She knew her
Right.
tool and she was
And
good.
her limitation.
And her
Yeah.
limitations. She didn't pretend, right?
Mhm. Right.
And so I got to keep my skill honed, even with her clients, because they would happily let me listen with the fetoscope. But working with her for so many years, I always had a Doppler with me.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes, depending on where mom is in labor, if we want to listen, like I don't want to have to ask her to lie on her back.
Right. Exactly.
I don't want to have to bring her out of where
Exactly.
she is if she wants heart tones and we
Yeah.
think we
Right.
need heart tones. We need
Right.
to gather that information. We're not in fear. We're gathering information. I
Right.
can do that with less impact
Agreed.
with a Doppler. Also, when you have those persistent OP babies during labor, I'm sorry, especially during labor,
It's
I
really
don't know
hard.
how you would ever get a heart tone.
What made me buy a Doppler finally, you'll
Mhm.
laugh at this, was there was a picture of a birth and the woman who was a tall woman with a probably 10 and 11 pound baby, big baby. And she was sitting on the toilet. So her big belly's hanging over. I'm lying on the floor on my back with my head basically against the toilet stem with the fetoscope, and I'm pushing it up into her belly that's hanging over the
Oh,
front. I looked at that picture, and was like, Bennett, that's ridiculous, right? That's ridiculous.
and why didn't you have a Doppler before then?
Well, this was when they first started coming out, for one
They
Okay,
thing.
were very
So
it
expensive.
wasn't an
I mean,
ideology.
I was comfortable with fetoscope, right? Like
Right.
that's what I learned, and that's, as a matter of fact, I still prefer it prenatally
Hmm.
because it's a more specific tool. But so that was about the time they came out in a way that you could afford one,
Right.
right? So I bought my first one, which was just this little, I don't even know where it is anymore. It was very early form of the Doppler. And what I used to tell people is when like I didn't care, I preferred the fetoscope prenatally, but in labor, I would prefer that you not have to accommodate me. I would
Hmm.
prefer that I accommodate you. So,
Totally.
I can
Without
use
having to be on a bathroom floor
right,
under a
yeah,
toilet. Right.
right, yeah, preferably, it was just ridiculous. So, it's not about the tool, it's about the philosophy with which you use the tool and who has the power in the room.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's, and one of the ways that I got my clients, because everybody, by the time I came into practice, was very used to everybody just having a Doppler and fetoscopes were
Mhm. And they caught on pretty fast.
right. They did. Well, I mean, look how easy it is, right? I mean,
Totally. Totally.
it was just a skill I never wanted to lose. So my little welcome package with my clients included a fetoscope of their very own. So they got used to listening with their fetoscope. And then we would
hmm
listen together at
hmm
prenatals. And
hmm
um, I I loved it so much, number one, because again, it's about who has the power in the room. They
Right.
can find, because I would just be like, where are you listening to your baby at when I would
Right.
come? Like, where are you finding heart tones these days? Because I know they're listening because they have their own little fetoscope, right?
Mhm.
And I remember when I had invited Christy Smith, she was teaching for Ancient Art Midwifery back in the day, teaching for Carla, and I'd invited her to come teach their midwifery skills lab because I liked hosting people instead of me traveling. I wanted them to do the traveling. So so my clients were all the pregnant models that came to the workshop. And all of them with these student midwives are showing them how to use the fetoscope.
Right. Right.
And I was just like, oh, I love this so much. Like this is community midwifery here.
hmm
Like
hmm
you know, I just remember watching one of my clients go, "Oh yeah, she's a little persnickety. You got to kind of jiggle her right here, and then you'll find her right here." You know,
Right.
like they do this. And they're just like showing, and they're like, and even with palpation, they were like, "Oh yeah, like usually, yeah, usually her knees are right there, so you've kind of got to get back here." And I just loved it so
That's
much.
cool.
Like I think traditionally we weren't meant to be isolated either.
Hmm.
Agreed.
You know.
Isolated in birth and
Yeah, or
isolated in
even throughout our
pregnancy.
pregnancies, like it was even called the estimated date of confinement, right? Like
Oh,
when the obstetrics came up, because
Right.
you were not to be seen when pregnant.
Right.
wow.
Right.
In purity culture, right? Like
Right.
you were dirty now.
Hmm.
It was
Right.
proof you had had sex.
Yeah.
Like
No
a
denying
child
it.
isn't. Like once you've had a child, like that's no longer proof that you've had sex, apparently. Just make it make sense, right?
Could have
So
come from somewhere else.
So I think that all the little pregnant ladies would probably get together with their own little sewings. You know, I imagine it red tent style almost with the pregnant women
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
sharing like their own methods of, well, how do you deal with your varicose veins and how do you deal with, you know, like I feel like for a while there where I live with the Asheville Holistic Birth Collective, we recreated that.
Hmm.
And it just looked so natural. Everybody came and it didn't matter, much like when we do our intensives, how everybody comes in the room and there can be opposite ideologies, but we
Hmm.
come together and we're vulnerable and we get to show ourselves and be seen and then see others. And so there's a common thread there, even with our
Mhm.
differences. I watched that happening with these moms too. They could come from very different worlds. I watched the
Mhm.
yuppie moms and the hippie moms who didn't shave their pits, listening to each other's babies and palpating and
Cool.
connecting in this way. And their kids are still friends.
Because we're all human. It makes us all human together. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Good. Good conversation. Any last thoughts before we finish?
The only thing I will say is that midwifery will always exist.
Yeah.
You know,
They haven't
that's
been able to get rid of us yet.
will always exist. As long as humans exist, midwifery will exist alongside.
Hmm. It's women's wisdom. It
Mhm.
doesn't, that's the importance of passing it down. And
Mhm.
yeah, teach
It's
your
meant
friends, teach your daughters, teach your aunts.
Mhm.
It's mammal wisdom. I mean, we see it in the dolphins. They have it,
Right.
Right.
I
you know.
love it.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys, thank you for the good conversation. We'll catch you next time.